Hello, this is Court Watch with Alex Sawyer, and I'm excited to bring you the latest episode of my podcast, where I am joined by Ilya Shapiro, Senior Fellow and Director of Constitutional Studies at the Manhattan Institute. He will react to the latest arguments before the Supreme Court over a Maryland County school board which is not allowing parents to opt their children out of LGBTQ-related story time. The conflict arose when the Montgomery County Board of Education in Maryland decided not to let elementary-age kids opt out of reading storybooks on gender transitioning, pride parades, and other LGBTQ issues. When the inclusivity reading program was rolled out in 2022, parents were able to opt their children out of certain readings. But in 2023, the school system canceled that option. A group of parents from different faiths, Muslim, Catholic, Protestant, and Jewish, argued that the school board was infringing on their First Amendment rights, the free exercise of religion, since there was no opt-out option for their child. I'll have Shapiro tell me where he thinks the court is going on this one, and also a little bit about his own book, which came out earlier this year and is also focused on education. Lawless, the Miseducation of America's Elites. I'll also have him preview an upcoming legal battle before the justices next week involving a Catholic charter school that was first given the green light to open, but now the state of Oklahoma objects to it on First Amendment grounds. Hey, Ilya, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. I just want to jump right in and talk a little bit about being in the courtroom earlier this week when the justices heard the dispute over LGBTQ story time out of Montgomery County. It was interesting seeing the body language of the justices. I got the feeling that there was the GOP majority is together, and maybe even Kagan might side with them on this, with the parents. I wanted to ask you, after listening to arguments, what was your take? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the petitioners are going to win. I should say that I filed a brief supporting the challenge to the Montgomery County policy. And as it came out during oral argument, that policy that is denying an opt-out for certain sensitive subjects that a broad coalition of parents, Muslims, Jews, Orthodox Christians, Catholics, Protestants, objected to. And it's one of the very few, if not the only, school district in the country that doesn't allow an opt-out. And again, to be clear, this was sharpened during the discussion. It's not a matter of the parents wanting to change the curriculum or impose something else. They just don't want their kids to be exposed to some of these things. And the justices, a majority, were befuddled why the school board wasn't doing that, given that it had been providing opt-outs for these same storybooks until 2023. And there are plenty of other opt-outs in all sorts of other contexts. So yeah, this is, Montgomery County is a very, very blue jurisdiction just north of D.C. in the suburbs. And my neighboring jurisdiction, I'm here in Falls Church, Virginia, across the river from Maryland. And it seemed like the justices, there's going to be a win for the petitioners. They were incredulous that Montgomery County seems to think that there's no burden and that, you can just send your kid to a different school, even though there's not school choice in
Not only that, you mentioned there was also like they opt out of musicals or like health class. So why not offer it here? It's
right. And at one point the lawyer said, well, it turns out when we were offering an opt-out, too many parents opted out, so we had to stop. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything?
Well, maybe that's a sign that you should revisit the curriculum, right?
That's a separate issue. Absolutely, that would be the inference that I would draw from that. But
I don't think you have to be a lawyer to draw that inference, right? It just seems like common sense. But I'll go ahead and I'll move on. I'll ask you about, you had a book out earlier this year, also on the topic of education. So it's, you want to show me Lawless, the Miseducation of America's Elites. And I love this from your take. You have a special insight on this. So it's really about, I guess, like the liberal takeover of higher education, of these Ivy League schools. What motivated you to write the book? And what, if somebody were to read it, what is something you think that they would learn?
Well, it's the illiberal takeover. This is a point I make again and again, and I've been making in the 3 months since it's come out, that this is not just the latest in a long line of conservative complaints about liberal faculty bias. That's an issue. But what's new and what makes this a hot topic, and what we're seeing with the Trump administration going after Harvard and Columbia and other schools, is that we see a denial of objective truth. We see a perversion of core classical liberal values like free speech, due process, equality under the law. Those Berkeley hippies who took over the faculty lounge in the 60s that started the leftward shift of academia would now be considered retrograde white supremacists, according to the social justice woke mob these days, which is being placated by weak leaders. And so, the idea that all institutions are illegitimate, need to be rebuilt according to an intersectional matrix of identity categories, it's really dangerous. And especially as I focus on in my book with respect to law schools, which, after all, produce the next generation of gatekeepers of our legal and political institutions.
Right. They're supposed to understand constitutional rights, right? So it's a little scary. On that same topic, like talking about understanding the Constitution, there's a case that a lot of people have asked me about coming up. I think it's April 30th, so Tuesday. The Oklahoma is the AG is against a Catholic charter school opening up. I think the governor is for it. So it's kind of split. Like they're both Republicans. It's split politicians in the state. I wanted to ask you, where are you on this? There's been some questions presented to me, like how is it that a state could fund or authorize a religious school? Can you kind of, shed some light on that?
Yeah, so Oklahoma, like many states, has charter schools. What are charter schools? These are independently run schools that are funded by the state. It's kind of like a public-private hybrid with some modicum of school choice, in the sense that if the parent sends their kids to this school, the funding that goes to that kid's public education follows them to this charter school. And the wrinkle in Oklahoma is that this is open to any sort of private school, any sort of independent school, so long as it's not religious. And I think this goes headlong against a series of precedents in the last decade where the court has said you don't have to set up any particular state program, but if you do, you can't discriminate based on religious status. This came up in the case of funding for school choice. This came up in the case about playground refurbishment, where,
Right.
yeah, Trinity Lutheran is the name of that case. Here the wrinkle is a charter school a public government school, in the sense that it's a direct public funding of religion. And I filed a brief in this case as well, making the point that states fund plenty of nonprofit independent organizations to provide lots of social services, whether it's taking care of the homeless or the elderly or daycare programs, or a whole host of my brief goes through a litany of state contracting with independent providers. And again, they don't say that you can or can't be religious or anything like that. They just look at, can you do the service that we are asking you to do? And this is the same thing here. I think this is going to be a pretty contentious argument, and there's a good chance actually that it might end up being 4-4 in the end. Amy Coney Barrett is recused because she had worked with the Notre Dame Law School clinic that is representing the petitioners in this case. So that's kind of unfortunate, but we'll see where John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh are on this, whether there can be a 5-3 majority. And it's unfortunate that we're already discounting the three progressive justices, the Democratic appointed justices, but that's just the nature of the game with these things.
Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you to react to the Supreme Court granting, on an expedited basis, I guess, the May 15th arguments over President Trump looking to end birthright citizenship. Were you surprised by that? And then also, do you think that we'll actually get them to squarely kind of weigh in on this like nationwide injunction issue we're seeing across the country with these district court judges?
Yes, I was surprised. And yes, they took the case specifically to look at these procedural things. We will not get a decision on the merits of whether the president can change the rules of who gets citizenship and cut off citizenship to children of either illegal aliens or those who are here for birth tourism for a short amount of time. That is the substantive, the big meaty area, of course. I think that's going to be decided next term once lower courts have fully processed these things. This is purely about nationwide injunctions, about process of how quickly these things get appealed, because we've obviously seen a slew of action on what's known as the emergency docket, pejoratively the shadow docket, which is a misnomer because none of this is done in the shadows. It's just done quickly without the normal process, and often with oral argument, as we're getting here. So I do hope that the court uses this case to give guidance to lower courts, because frankly, activists and government officials on all over the ideological spectrum over the course of more than a decade have been complaining about the use or misuse of emergency appeals, nationwide injunctions, all of these sorts of things. So, don't get your hopes up that this is going to be a decision once and for all on the constitutional issue. It's instead this procedural stuff that concerns law nerds a lot, but a lot of kind of people who just lay followers of the news might not be aware of.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about all this, and especially about your book. I think it's a topic that is extremely timely, even through the Trump administration, with what we're seeing with the president's war with Harvard over federal funding. So I'm sure all of that will stay in the headlines for quite a while.
Thanks, and I look forward to reading your book. I know you have
Thank
one
you.
coming out later this
I
year.
do. Yes, coming in June. Of course, June will be a busy month with the Supreme Court, and
You have nothing else going on, yeah.
Right? Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Court Watch. If you have not subscribed yet to this podcast, please do so, and also feel free to email me interesting questions that you want explored about the legal reporting world. I'll do my best to answer them during each episode. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Listen to my podcast, Court Watch, at WashingtonTimes.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.